So, what about if we write on the blackboard, the green board, the three natures and the three non-natures? Well, what is this all stemming from? Number one. Remember the initial statement that's being explained? What was the initial statement?
All phenomena are natureless.
All phenomena are natureless. And so the so-called mind-only school or yogic practice school explains this by
saying that all phenomena have not natureless, have three natures. All phenomena have three natures.
all phenomena have all three.
Have all three.
That statement is wrong because what Buddha was saying is that you can break down, is another way of putting it, all phenomena into three classes called the three natures. Those two seem to be contradictory. Are they contradictory?
I wouldn't say so.
Okay, now, this is an essential point. How to understand that these are two ways then of using the term three natures. Two ways. All phenomena have the three natures, and if you take phenomena in general, they are broken down separately into three natures, and what is the one isn't the other. Okay, but before we get to that, let's do the breakdown one, okay? Would you write the three natures on the green board, please? Then, in terms of explaining non-nature, all phenomena are natureless. How do you, that takes care of the all phenomena side. What about the natureless side?
And there are three non-natures.
Three non-natures. All right. Would you please write the three non-natures? Now, it's very interesting that these two radically different formats are supposed to be non-contradictory, and they are. By understanding this, a whole lot of mess is cleared up, but we have not explained how this could be so.
Yeah.
Now, so you pair them 1, 2, 3, right? So 1 goes to 1, 2 goes to 2, 3 goes to 3, right? Other powered natures are natureless in terms of production, okay? Other powered natures are natureless in terms of production, in terms of self-production.
So imputational natures are naturalist in terms of character.
Right.
And thoroughly established natures are ultimately
Ultimate
non-natures.
non-natures. Why? Now, wait a minute. We won't do the why. Okay, you got those three statements? What does it mean that other powered natures are natureless in terms of self-production? Or, you could, this is just my fancy way of making it easier to understand in terms of translation. You could say they are production non-natures. You see? A little harder to understand. In what way are other powered natures natureless in terms of production?
Production, self-production.
It seems like the idea behind something being called an other power nature is that it depends on causes and conditions. There's
Yes.
no essential entity to it. So this is what the natureless in terms of self-production is pointing out.
Okay. And so now what does the only term you added in that was outside of the context was they don't have their own entity or something like that? What does that mean?
I'm not exactly sure.
Oh, okay. Now what does self-production mean?
Well, it seems like that's sort of the, well, it's, I guess, by the terminology, obviously, it's the opposite of other powered natures, I guess you could call it, produced by others. And that's the way. So a self-produced nature would be an object that is independent of causes and conditions.
Okay, produced under its own power, or just. There are disputes on what self-production means. The nihilists hold that, what makes the roundness of peas? That's just the way they are. That's their own nature. They're produced that way by their own nature. Why are people rich or poor? This is not due to karma. It's just, that's the way it is, okay? So one interpretation is to take it, self-production here, as causeless production even. Another interpretation is to take it as referring to the type of production that Sankhyas talk about. Sankhyas say that things exist in non-manifest form when their main causes come together, when they're still not evident, they're in non-manifest form, that the thing exists there. A pot exists in a lump of clay. And production means manifestation of a non-manifest existent entity. So as Dharmakirti says to Asankhya, then it follows that on top of a blade of grass where there's a worm, there are 100 elephants. Because that, taken that this worm is going to be reborn for 100 lifetimes as an elephant. And what does Asankhya answer?
That's right.
Yeah. In non-manifest form. No problem. But it's trying to, what Dharmakirti is using is a type of reasoning that stands oddly in the face of worldly perceptions. Okay? So some people say that's what it's referring to. I come down on the side of the nihilistic view because, as you see in the sutra, that's Buddhist, as you will see, or have seen, will see, in the Sutra Unraveling the Thought. Buddha talks about things being produced by causes and conditions. He does say, however, other causes and conditions. So that leads some people to think, well, what he's talking about is self and other causes and conditions. But anyway, that's an issue that is for the, I don't know which book that's in.
Why can't you say other produced natures? Why power? Why not produced?
Because the Tibetan reads Shenwang. Shenwang Ngonyi.
What would
Other produced to be fine.
it be gears?
Other powered, actually.
Other power. Jeffrey?
Now, just a sec, give me some examples of other powered natures. This class is going to be like take you into a spider's web and into a maze, and it's very bad if this is your first class. But it's just going to get worse and worse. Last time it was all very clear. But this is how it's going to be made clearer. What are some other powered natures?
Anything that's produced. Table.
Table, person, building, chair. Can you think of anything that's produced that is not another powered nature? A quark. You know,
Not produced.
you break down atoms and so forth,
Is that not
and then you get down to quarks. No, it is, right?
It is.
I mean, let's go to the smallest, to the big, okay? The universe, whatever that means. So all these things are under the other power. They're other powered natures. Now, what is odd about saying this is an other powered nature?
But also it would have the imputational nature and the thoroughly established nature as well.
What's odd about the word nature? And you say it would have the imputational nature
Right.
and the other powered nature.
That it itself is a phenomenon and not, it's strange to speak of it, a phenomenon as a nature.
Yes, that's strange. So it means like that which has a nature of being other powered, right? You turn it into that statement. Whereas with the others, you don't have to. Now, that's how that all phenomena have all three natures. So it's easy to see how this, for instance, you can even say has the other powered nature in that it is something that is produced by causes and conditions that are other than itself. And as we were saying last time, Buddha taught this first, not naturelessness in terms of self-production, because he wanted people to understand that, sentient beings to understand that their own pleasure and pain was not just something that existed, but it was due to other causes and conditions, and thus, in order to shape their own future, sentient beings, we, have to mold it by engaging in actions, right? And thus have to engage in virtues to bring pleasure, happiness, and disengage from non-virtues to avoid pain, unhappiness. It's the initial reformation of behavior. Now, all phenomena. What about emptiness? How does emptiness, you see, if you can posit all three natures with respect to all phenomena, okay, no, just leave that. Just leave it for a moment, because it's this is spiderweb maze material. Okay, but I want to pose the question, since we began by saying that these really aren't contradictory, and I agree that they aren't. But let's look at it first this way. Other powered natures only means things produced from causes and conditions in this context. And non-natures, in terms of self-production, are only other powered natures, impermanent things, in this way of looking at it. Then, what about the imputational nature?
How does a phenomena have an imputational nature?
Yeah.
Well, it's a meaning, a term is imputed upon it.
Now, put it in terms of, in the way we talked about it last time.
Oh,
How many types of imputational natures are there?
well, they're permanent. Oh, existent and non-existent.
Existent and non-existent. What is an illustration of an existent imputational nature?
Non-compounded space.
Uncompounded space. So if you take all phenomena the impermanent are other powered natures. Okay? Emptinesses are thoroughly established natures. Okay? Other permanent, emptinesses are permanent, other permanent phenomena, which makes them existent, are existent imputational natures. So that's how you divide all phenomena into the three natures, okay? Other permanent phenomena such as uncompounded space, and for those who are doing Tibetan, pot, isolate, etc., which we care dearly. Are included there. What about non-existent imputational natures? What's the most common non-existent imputational nature?
The horns of a rabbit.
The horns of a rabbit. It doesn't exist. So anything that doesn't exist is a non-existent in anything imputational nature. So where are they included in this?
They're not, because they're not phenomena.
They're not included in it because they're not phenomena. Phenomena here in this translation system, being the translation, as we said last time, for dharma, when it has this wide meaning, which is synonymous with existence. And it comes from the verbal root dur, which means to hold, and it's that which holds its own entity. In Tibetan, ranging mo zimba, right? Everybody who's done Tibetan has memorized it. Chirkitsen yisho sana, ranging mo zimba chujin se. Yeah. So non-existent imputational natures. Now, Buddha was, it appeared, not especially concerned with existent imputational natures in laying out this threefold format. What he's really concerned with is identifying important non-existent imputational natures. So, what's the most important non-existent imputational nature?
A self.
Then it absurdly follows that a self does not exist. Do you accept it or not accept it?
Better accept it.
Okay. Then it absurdly follows that persons do not exist. You can either say why or I accept it.
Why?
Because selves do not exist. So you can either quarrel with the reason, which you've already agreed to, or you can say there's no entailment. Just because selves do not exist doesn't, or is not, that selves do not exist does not entail that persons do not exist. What do you want to say?
I'll go with that.
Which one would you say?
No entailment.
No entailment. There is entailment because self and person are synonymous, are equivalent. Whatever is the one is the other. So this is it's a cute debate because Buddhism is a system of selflessness, right? So you expect self not to exist. You expect it not to. But since self is, in a general way, is equivalent to person, then when you give the general answer, you say self does exist. Because there's just a rule that's invoked that between the existent and the non-existent, existence predominates. Don't ask me why. But you can sort of feel why. I mean, you know, if you just asked in general, does self exist, without specifying it, you've got to go with one way or the other. You can't answer both. Well, they don't want people to answer both. Okay? Now, does self in the term selflessness exist? Does self, yes. Does self within the term selflessness exist?
No.
No. Does self exist? You know, just give me the stock answer.
Today, yes. Yes.
Okay, so now we've established that self exists. So now give me the chief non-existent imputational nature if it's not self. Self then would be included where? Among the three natures. Other powered natures, thoroughly established natures, or imputational natures.
But presuming even though we're saying it exists, we're not saying it's a permanent phenomenon at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
So
At this stage,
goes
will we
to
say
another
that
power
later?
nature.
Other powered nature, right. Persons are other powered natures. Selves are other powered natures. Even though self, within the term selflessness, doesn't exist at all, and thus is a non-existent imputational nature. So on to the question of what the most important non-existent imputational nature is. Paul?
It's a independent, permanent, autonomous self.
Most important? That's in the coarse selflessness of the person. He's just described the self in the context of the coarse selflessness of the person, which is permanent, unitary, and independent. It has this threefold nature. And it's said that this is not innate, even if one by one there are innate versions of them. To hold the three together is not even innate. So how could that be? How could a permanent, unitary, and independent self, person, I, be the most important non-existent imputational nature? It is an non-existent imputational nature. It ain't the most important. Yeah.
I know. Inherent existence?
Now we're dealing with the mind-only school, which according to Gelugpa scholars holds that all phenomena even inherently exist. But now let's look at this. Let's look at other power natures. They are, oh, I see, imputational natures. They are naturelessness, they are natureless in terms of character. What does character mean?
Self-existence?
It means established by way of their own character. Remember from last
Right,
time?
right.
Established by way of their own character. Imputational natures, whether existent or non-existent, are not established by way of their own character. Now, if it's only imputational natures that are non-natures in terms of being established by way of their own character, what does that say about the other two natures? What? They are established by way of their own character. So if they're established by way of their own character, certainly they're inherently existent.
But how is other powers?
And in the Sutra Unraveling the Thought itself, it says, that which does not subsist by way of its own character is not produced. Which then means that whatever is produced does subsist or exist by way of its own character. Clear statement. Clear statement. So they don't see established by way of its own character as meaning what other schools of thought place on this. So what was my original? Oh yes, we're still looking for the chief non-existent imputational nature according to the mind-only school.
Difference in entity of self and object?
Yes, of
Or
subject and
subject
object.
and object, right.
Difference of entity of subject and object. What about saying it's the conception of a difference of entity of subject and object? Would there be any problem with that? Karen?
I'm wondering if conceptions are phenomena. They are.
Yes. So they're not non-existent imputational natures. Now conception here is a translation for the Tibetan zimba. Apprehension, conception. And zimba here has actually more the agent side. It's conceiver, and even refers to a consciousness that conceives. I mean, either to the action or to the consciousness. So, what about the concept that objects are established, that there's a difference of entity between subject and object? What about the concept? Is it a non-existent imputational nature? The concept that?
I think it's an existing one.
Yeah. Okay. We'll leave it at that. In Tibetan, I would think it would be something like Chenji, meaning generality. So it would be an existent imputational nature. Okay. So, Buddha wanted people to know, you see, some people say that like you were dangerously getting close to, that the imputation of a difference of entity between subject and object is this non-existent imputational nature that Buddha wanted people to identify. Now, Buddha wanted people to get rid of the imputation, the act of imputing or the consciousness that imputes. But it exists. How do you get rid of a consciousness that imputes a difference of entity between subject and object? If Buddha wanted people to get rid of their conception, their consciousnesses that conceive that object and subject are different entities, okay? How would people do that? By shutting down their minds?
To see in the true nature both of the mind and the object.
Okay, what is this true nature? Right, but
The true nature is not a dichotomy. They're not
the,
separate.
the true nature is a non-difference of entity of subject and object. You must see that there is not a difference of entity between subject and object. You must realize the true nature, which is the emptiness of a difference of entity of subject and object. Okay? Both right. So that's how a consciousness that is an other-powered nature, that conceives of a highly deleterious imputational nature, is overcome. How? By paying attention to the emptiness of, by paying attention to the emptiness of the, let's say I want to word it in the most thorough way. The emptiness of this non-existent imputational nature in other powered natures. In. So other powered natures are the basis of falsely imagined imputational natures, and they are the basis of the true reality, which is the thoroughly established nature. So Buddha gave the name thoroughly established, Yongdru, Yongsu. In Sanskrit, what is it? Nishpana. And that's easy for everybody to write down. Nishpana. Pari means thoroughly, and nishpana means settled down. So I give this very literal translation because Buddha, as opposed to this pejorative term imputational, wanted people to understand that this is what's thoroughly established, not what you're imagining. So imputational, I used to translate as imaginary, which should be fine too. And it's even for uncompounded space. Imaginary nature is not too bad, okay? For the existent imaginary natures. Imaginary has more force in terms of telling you, but impute also, if you look at impute in the dictionary, it has a very strong meaning like, don't impute that on me, you know? I don't have it, right? It doesn't have it. And we use the term, things imputedly exist in the middle way school, and so I want to use the same term also here. And it has tremendous impact, whether you say imaginary nature or imputed nature, when you look at the fact that, when you consider the fact that we live in a world of a difference of entity of subject and object, and our emotions are based, you know, our lusts and our hatreds and our whatever they are, our afflictive emotions are based on that. Is our love? Is love based on such a misconception, on this kind of other powered nature that needs to be removed? Do you follow? I'm trying to, is love based on the misconception? I said afflictive emotions are based on this misconception that other powered natures are or have a difference of entity between subject and object, right? His love, his faith, is the wish to attain Buddhahood, founded on a difference of entity, on misconceiving a difference of entity between subject and object. The answer, according to the system, has to be
Yes.
yes! My God! Then how could you practice the path? How could Buddhist people ask people to practice the path? Then you would have to resort to paradox. That Buddha says, practice the path, but there's no path to practice. You see? And that's often said, right? Often said. I mean, we could haul out some sutras even that say this. But that's taken not to be the meaning. Not to be the meaning. Because this is a system that does not allow paradox. It doesn't allow paradox. So ordinary love, attachment and so forth, is based on the misconception of the imputational nature in other powered natures. Now we can step back and say the imputational nature. We mean this important non-existent imputational nature. You see, the general term gets, in a sense, scrunched to its principal meaning, often. In the sutra, actually maybe always, in the Sutra Unraveling the Thought. That, one's wish for enlightenment can be mixed with this sort of misconception, but that when you overcome the misconception, it doesn't have to disappear. The other day, interesting, there's a practice of, like when you're sweeping, I forget what I was doing, but it was like that. But it was something that I was doing that was quite selfish. It was for me. And I was thinking, well, here I am spending all this time. I should be, doing one of these practices where you think, I'm cleaning away the dirtiness of the afflictive emotions of all sentient beings. I stained a shirt and I was using a toothbrush on it. This spray and wash, which didn't work, so I was, and I don't know if that was it or not, if that's important enough. Anyway, often little things are important. And so I started thinking, well, I'm washing away the dirt of all sentient beings, and then I didn't want to do it anymore. That shows you that it was 100%, you see? 100% greedy, 100% greedy. And you can want to achieve enlightenment for the sake of being unusual and having a protruding crown, head, big bump on the head, and people, oh, wow. And, it might wash out when you gave up that wish. But it doesn't have to. Do you follow? Mixed with that, it doesn't have to. I'm just bringing up a side issue. So, the discovery of this does not undermine practice of the path. So then, imputational natures are non-natures in terms of character. What sort of character do they lack?
What sort of character?
What does character mean?
What is character? Established by way of their own character.
Right. They're not established by way of their own character, which means that, by extension, if they're not established by way of their own character, give it a more positive. What are they? Yes. Yes, they depend upon thought, their imputations, right?
Which means the other power.
Excuse me?
Which means they're other powered. That's what you mean by imputational nature existing in other powered nature.
It's a very good point. It's a very good point. Now, as much as you can put me in the maze, put me in the maze. I'll put you in every now and then, and then suddenly the maze disappears. Now, they argue about such things. For instance, the space of a pot, we're not talking about the area, but the lack of obstructive contact that we were talking about last time, that is right with it, obviously there's a lack of obstructive contact here, as we were saying, and there's even a lack of obstructive contact here. What is preventing my hand from going through it is the presence of a material object of the same type, presence. So there's an absence of obstructive contact right where the table is in order for the table to be here. So then, was that absence of obstructive contact, this uncompounded space, produced when the table was produced? Similar question. It'll disappear, it'll go out of it, it comes into existence and goes out of existence. It depends upon the production of the table, but is it produced by?
Or does it arise together?
It arises in the sense of comes into existence together, but it's not, the claim is it's not produced. Okay. So the difference of entity of subject and object doesn't exist at all. It's merely imagined, imputed. Yes.
I still don't understand what character is.
Establishment by way of its own character.
No, just character.
Establishment
Itself.
means established by way of its own character.
But that's saying character again. What do we mean by character? What is character? What was the Tibetan? What was it saying?
Can you help him? Tsenyi means, in Tibetan, Tsenyi means Rangi Tsenyi Vitruva. What does character mean? It means establishment by way of its own character. So then you should at least ask me, what does establishment by way of its own character mean?
All right.
Right?
Right.
Move the question down one. That is a very hard question. That is a very hard question. Very hard.
Can't we define? I mean, don't we want to try to define the terms that we're using or different?
Of course.
Like character?
I just,
Yeah.
like, now again, he's back at character. Now you can ask me to define Rangi Tsenyi Truba. I'm sorry, establishment by way of its own character. But I've already given you the meaning of character here in terms of being established by way of its own character. Okay? But now don't ask me again to give you the meaning of character.
All right. Okay. So
You follow?
Yeah. I do. Yeah.
But the
next
question, okay, of what does it mean to be established by way of its own character is very hard to answer. Why? Because other powered natures are established by way of their own character, and thoroughly established natures are established by way of their own character. And to have a meaning for these two that would hold for emptiness, which, the word permanent here means, like the uncompounded space of this table, does it exist forever? No. It comes into being and it goes out of being. But the meaning of permanent is... What? Now translate.
A common locus of being phenomena and momentary, or not momentary.
So a common locus, something that's a common locus of being a phenomenon, that means it exists. Otherwise, the horns of a rabbit would be permanent. Okay? And is not momentary. So even something that comes into existence and goes out of existence, okay, can be permanent on this meaning. of the word permanent. Now, what about a single moment of the table? Smallest moment. And its uncompounded space. God, we're going around the barn to answer this question. I'm hoping he'll forget. That comes into existence and goes out of existence in one moment. Is it momentary?
No.
It has to not be momentary. So momentary has to mean then something that's produced by causes and conditions and exists for only a moment. You start, when you press things too hard, you run into very interesting complexities. Anyway, thoroughly established natures, it is clear in the sutra when it says that which does not subsist by way of its own nature is not produced. And the sutra says that other powered natures are produced by other causes and conditions, okay? You put those two together, those two statements together, and it's clear that other powered natures subsist by way of their own character. Did I say character? Character natures make a difference. The sutra never says actually, I thought I found some support for this. Keep alive to, if you read somewhere in the sutra, in these three books, somewhere where there's a hint that thoroughly established natures also are established by way of their own character. There's no... I thought I found something, actually. But what these scholars do is they say if other powered natures are established by way of their own character, then their final reality has to be established by way of its own character. Otherwise, it would have to not be established by way of its own character and would be merely imputed by thought. And that's very weird to say about the thoroughly established nature. You can feel that. But once you make that jump and say that other powered natures and thoroughly established natures, emptinesses, are both established by way of their own character, to give a general meaning of established by way of its own character becomes very difficult. I got attuned to this in Dharamsala several years ago. I was debating, and somebody, two people behind me were debating that issue. And you tend to, you pick up other people's debates as, in the pauses in your own, And I thought, oh my, that is an issue, isn't it? Now, one really good scholar on these advanced issues, really hard issues, gave an interpretation which at first blush sounds completely silly. He said the meaning of other powered natures being established by way of their own character is that they're produced by causes and conditions. The meaning of thoroughly established natures being established by way of their own character is that they are the final nature of phenomena. He gave no more for the meaning of established by way of their own character than the meaning of being another powered nature and the meaning of being a thoroughly established nature. It was a cruddy answer. But do you have any other answers? So you see, that's one of the nitpicky, not nitpicky, it comes to be important questions. And in this book, I give my own my own interpretation at some point. Yeah.
down or what?
Now, so are you clear? This table is another power nature. What is its, imputational nature now that we crunch it down to this most important meaning, most important non-existent imputational nature?
That it's there.
That's an interesting way of putting it. But be more...
Being different in entity from the subject?
Yes, being different in entity from the subject apprehending or perceiving it. Now, give me an example of a subject that is apprehending or perceiving this table.
My eye consciousness.
Your eye consciousness, or your mental consciousness, right? Or wherever you put your mental consciousness. So what's the emptiness? Oh, sorry. What is the non-existent imputational nature of his eye consciousness perceiving the table that Buddha wanted him to understand and us to understand? Doesn't exist.
The non-existent imputational nature.
Of his eye consciousness. He just talked about the table.
That his eye consciousness is a subject perceiving the object table.
Oh,
It's
so
different.
Buddha was canceling that there are subjects and objects?
I don't know.
It's a very interesting point. In the literature that comes from India, that's the vocabulary. That subject and object are being refuted. In this tradition of scholarship, they say that subject and object are different entities. Subject and object are not being negated or not being understood to be non-existent, but a difference of entity between them. Otherwise, persons and tables, you couldn't distinguish them. But coming over from India, the terms here for apprehending, what I use is apprehended object and apprehending subject, to be very literal. And it's made into a very short term, sun, zin. Sun means apprehended object, zin means apprehending subject. So this means sunja, the object apprehended, and zin means zimba or zinche. In Sanskrit, graya, which is an object noun, graya meaning that which is apprehended, and grahaka, meaning apprehender. And when you read Indian texts, this is being refuted. Object and subject itself, apprehended object and apprehending subject. Whereas in this system's layout of it, it's not apprehended object and apprehended subject, but these as different entities. In Tibetan, Sung Zin Mo Tade Du Truba. We're saying being or established Truba as Tade different entities. So object and subject, or apprehended object and apprehending subject, established, well actually the establishment of apprehended object and apprehending subject as different entities. It's the as different entities part of it.
So zeta de drupa, would that be too small?
That's all right.
Okay.
They use the term substantial entity in Tibetan instead of in Tibetan ngotade, say zetade, for impermanent phenomena. When you can't use ze, substantial entity, when you're talking about apprehending uncompounded space, for instance. So the broadest possible term is ngo tate dutsimba rather than ze tate dutsimba.
Jeffrey?
Yes.
You translate ngo there as entity, but
Yes.
you translate ngo ngimepa as three non-natures.
Okay, so now let's get at the very end, some terms. These are the tree swabhava in Sanskrit, three natures. And I really haven't seen tree used with this, but it's obviously three. Ni, swa, ba, va, ta, which is ness, naturelessness, ni svabhavata. In Tibetan, very nicely translated as ngo sum and ngo mebasum. Ngo sum, ngo mebasum. The word being translated in Sanskrit here is swabhava. You can also do it as rangshin sum, tsenyi sum, but we'll get to that some other time. Ngo sum, ngo mebasum. You see, ngoni in Tibetan, ngoni is a translation for swabhava, which also is translated as, which also is rangshin, and thus rangshin sum. They usually don't say rangshin mebasum.
Is this how you get ngoni mebani ta?
Ngoni mebani. Yeah. So, what's at the beginning of this? Oh, it has a lot of background material. And so let's start at page 170 in Reflections on Reality. And 170 to 206. Yeah. And, keep working at reproducing this, okay?